This meeting is being recorded.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, AI robot.
That's when you get a moment to pull that agenda up.
Do you have a thumb drive or?
No, I had sent it out to the board.
Yeah, but that's not going to that.
Oh.
That's not online for anything like that.
What?
So, I mean, I could share it from this screen, but it's going to disappear later on.
That'll work. $7:28 and counting down. We do try and start meetings on time.
You wouldn't want
No,
no.
wouldn't want to spoil everything, right?
Oh, no.
Oh, thank you.
You get rid of the recording.
Figure out which Windows pointer I have.
Oh, because mine is there too.
It being 7:30, you all being here, we'll call the meeting to order. How's that for being official? I want to say welcome to everybody who's here. Good group tonight. And we have one new person. So we want to get you a chance to introduce yourself. And
You might have more than one.
no, more than one? Oh,
Go ahead.
did I get you signed in? Yep. Okay, all right, sorry. Oh, there we are, Mike, okay.
My name's Andrew.
Okay.
Recently licensed as a technician, so
Great,
just trying to get involved more.
excellent, welcome. Mike?
Mike, been active, not really in the military, but around for quite a while. Newly retired, so more time to spend.
Well, you're in ham radio, that'll eat it up real quick.
Yeah.
I'm Dave. I just recently took the exam and I'm still waiting for the FCC to give me my call sign. And I attended the last meeting here virtually, so thank you for the Zoom and all that you guys do. And just looking forward to finding out more about it and having fun.
Great, glad you came down. And how'd you find out about us?
Just Google search.
Oh, okay,
I think it took me to the ARRL's website.
okay. Good news. All right. And welcome to those who haven't physically been here before. And now that we have summer, maybe a little bit better weather, we'll be able to get more meetings going here. The minutes of the meeting are online at that website. Does anybody?
I haven't gone out yet, actually. Or at least that link was.
Hmm?
Do you have the latest link? Because it's not the annual business meeting.
No.
It would have come up on a different title.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
no. How do we get that in there?
You probably just edited it from the previous, from January.
No doubt. But I put it in the March, yeah.
These are-
Okay. Sorry about that.
These are membership meetings, not business meetings, technically.
Yeah, I don't,
I think you sent it out on the QST,
last name?
Nicholas, the correct one.
HRTO.
yeah, and now I've got my email up for everyone to see. I got
Yeah, oh,
Jesus.
anything interesting there?
Yeah, no, not really. Yeah, I'm not sure, my screen.
Well, does anyone have any corrections in the minutes that they haven't seen?
They look great to me.
All right. Or you have a motion?
We moved to accept. the-
Move to accept.
So,
We had second, third,
Call
and
who you
fourth.
are.
Oh, I'm Jeff.
Jeff? Okay.
Call
K9
sign.
UNZ.
Okay, say it.
K, Jeff, Fillion, K9 UNZ.
And that is a change.
Yes, there's my bragging rights for the.
Good.
Yeah,
And who was, we had several seconds over here. Who wants the second? Okay,
I'll second. Jim, K9 REO.
okay. Any other corrections, additions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, well, we're taken care of
We're
here.
all local now.
Treasurer's report, Sam.
Treasurer's report, we have $6,086.15. In our checking account, we have $2,044.14. In our CD, no change from last month. We have 56 members, $1,260 in dues paid, and we have no expenses so far this month.
All right. Anybody else?
Is that David Horton in there?
Yeah,
Hey, David, when you have a chance and you get your call sign, if you would send it to Sam Ledbetter,
okay.
I will put it into the membership and make sure we have your call sign.
Yep, I just paid my fee today. The FCC finally came through for me, so I'll have to see if I have a call sign when I get home.
Okay. So just whenever you get it, just let us know and I'll
Oh, I don't.
get it entered into our database.
Okay,
Imagine they're not the fastest.
You'll probably have it tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow.
Mine came the morning after.
Did it? Okay.
receive approval. All right, yeah. Do we have any other discussion on the treasurer's report? Questions? Could I get a move to approve it?
Somebody moved.
Somebody moved, who was it?
Paulette.
Paulette? Okay, thank you.
Oh, Sam.
No,
No, Sam.
who's,
Okay.
Yeah, it was KG9NG that moved.
Right.
Hey, Sam moved to approve, and we have a second.
NT9AL
Okay.
second.
who's
All right.
second?
Jim, K9
Second.
REO.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why I'm here tonight. I'll second it.
We just need the recording to be
Yeah,
consistent.
it needs to be recorded, so if you second it, please say your name, call sign, so that way it's recorded.
All right.
Easier to keep track of. All in favor of approval of the treasurer's report?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it is passed, approved. Bragging rights.
I dropped the C, so you'll see my call sign on the minutes a little later. So I am no longer KC9 UNZ, I am K9 UNZ, and I'm realizing what a pain in the neck that is, changing all of the places that you put your.
Yeah.
So I don't expect to make any.
Including
more-
Gmail,
Including Gmail?
it's gotta be 6 characters.
Ooh, see, yeah, ooh, so, yeah, no, I don't, yeah, no, really? Gee,
Yes, Gmail requires a minimum
yeah,
6.
How about that?
so I don't have it on.
All the stuff you learn when you get an
Yeah.
extra.
Exactly. So if you're gonna send anything to me, it's K9UNZ@ARRL net. That updated. Interesting, the number of things that automatically update. I'm not quite sure how they do that. They go and check things, but the QR, was it the QRZ page automatically updates, ARRL automatically changed and updated my stuff. There's a couple more that I got notification that they, oh, you changed your call sign. So
And congratulations on extra.
Yes.
thank you, thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Cannot hide.
Okay, go ahead.
General, Saturday.
General, all right, new general. Congratulations.
By the way, I just had a question. I did go to the website, fill out the membership form, pay
Yes.
my membership. I haven't seen any emails. Am I supposed to see emails?
Sam?
Yes,
Uh,
my email is samledbetter.3@gmail.
Okay, no, I think Jeff is asking, since he signed up, KE9 CQP, since he signed up online, does he get a response from you for the payment for dues?
No,
I'm just more curious if there are general emails outside of that I should be getting that I'm not getting.
Yes, well.
For the club, come
Yes.
talk to me at the end. I'll
Okay.
set you up with.
Thank you.
email.
Great.
Anyone here, talk to me.
Yeah, any other new members too. And that'll be great, because what Nicholas is gonna set you up for the QST, that goes to everybody on our list, so you'll be able to get everything that's going on. Okay. Any
Anyone
other,
else?
go ahead.
Anyone else?
Thomas?
I don't have anything, but
No
What?
contest winnings?
no.
No
I
quotas?
was sick for prefixes phone, so.
All right. Any other updates? No. Let's move on to the VE report.
The report we had for April 2025, 10 VEs with 7 candidates, achieving 4 new technicians, 1 new general, 1 upgrade to general, and 1 upgrade to extra, some of whom are in this room today.
Ah, there we go. Good representation here. Good. Anything else on that? Okay, VE report, thank you very much. We also go through the opportunities here. What I want to do is start with the Mara Ham Fest, which is coming up on April 26th, yes?
Quick word on that. It looks like, I don't think any magic will occur before then, but we have not been able to secure a VE team.
Okay.
So there will not be testing. If
At the
you're-
Ham Fest.
At the Ham Fest. So, so that's where you could put that on the website. We were looking around and trying to get that taken care of, but couldn't secure a team.
Last minute. Paul, you want to go through what we need for the Ham Fest?
Well, at this point, we've got a good number of people that volunteered.
Great.
Anyone else wants to volunteer, we can accommodate that. But this year, it turns out we have good crews, so.
Good. And if you do want to volunteer, there's a Friday night setup, for a couple hours. And then on Saturday for the Ham Fest, some people need to be there early for check-ins and things, security and people during the day. And then also the tear down at the end to help get things cleaned up, which we usually end at about noon.
The Ham Fest ends at noon, probably by 1:30, we're done tearing down, so.
Yeah, I think I gave you my email address last meeting, but I didn't hear anything, so I assumed.
Well, I haven't sent anybody out.
Oh.
I've been working on the assignments and I'll be sending that list out.
If you still need, I'm available.
Okay. And your name is?
Jeff.
Jeff.
Last name's Fritchie.
I think you're on the list, yeah. I think I got.
Our new general.
So, yeah, I've got the list just about done, trying to put where people want to work, what times they've got allowed. And I'll be sending that out shortly.
Cool. And I saw Bonnie Berg on the list of tables. So Lloyd's widow is going to be bringing in some of his stuff.
Oh, that's Lloyd's.
How
Okay.
many
That's
tables did you get?
What?
How many tables?
Oh, it's total?
What do we got, Jim?
2 or 3.
2 or 3 tables? Yeah. I was just curious,
Yeah.
representative of how much she's bringing.
Oh, Bonnie?
Yeah,
She's got 3 tables.
3 tables. That's
Well,
a
right.
sizable amount.
Yeah.
Great, and great place to meet people and, see what's going on and have a good time and pick up more stuff that you need to take home. Field day planning Zoom, we want to do that again on May 6th. That'll be the final online Zoom meeting before the actual field day itself. So you're all welcome to participate. And that will start at, is it 7 or 7:30? 7:30 down there. And will be a Zoom link set up, right? Okay. I don't know if anybody going to Dayton, the convention this year? No. Trek 100 is coming up. John still needs a few volunteers, but that's on the list. We'll have that for you if you want.
What date
Horribly
is-
Hilly Hundreds, Jeff.
What date is that?
What?
The Trek 100?
Trek 100, the Trek Bicycle
Yeah,
Company? It starts from their headquarters, and it's Trek 100 is, I think it's 100 kilometer. And so for area, you don't have to be an Aries member, but if you got 2-meter gear, or
Yeah.
you want to even do a ride along or something like that, you can get involved in that. And they're always needing volunteers. It's actually sponsored by a ham radio club in Illinois, but in fact, it's up here in Marshall, Wisconsin. And that is on June 7th. And if you want to come talk to me, Jeff, I can give you a contact information for that. Horribly Hilly, okay, we got the AWRL Field Day, which is,
I do need to just let you know.
okay.
Horribly Hilly, I need people. This is the first, Tom, I don't understand what it is with these people. They turn 80 years old and they think they should retire. I don't get it. But Tom is retired this year and has passed it on to me. So I do need folk at every level, net control, SAGs. I think I'm about halfway right now.
What's the date on that one?
The date is on June 14th. Yeah, basically all day. If you can just be there in the morning, let me know. If you can be there in the afternoon, let me know. We've got, we follow the riders around. Yeah, let me know. I don't have the final list of stops at this point, but it really doesn't change that much from year to year. It's pretty much the same route, unless, of course, on Friday afternoon, the towns oil the roads, which they've done before. But yeah, it's K9UNZ@ARRL.net. Let me know what you'd like to do. Again, SAG vehicles, rest stops, net control. So please, this is me begging. So part of the reason that I kind of say that up front, we're going to be going for a chunk of May. So I want to get as much I can done at the beginning of May, because I'll be back then for a couple of weeks before it kicks off in June. So as much as I can get arranged before we leave mid-May, would make me happy, and more stress-free. Anyway, okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, and AWRL Field Day is on June 28th and 29th. And the club, sponsors the space out at Badger Prairie County Park near Verona. And usually start setting up about 8 o'clock in the morning. Field day starts at 1, goes to 1 on Sunday, and then takes a couple hours to kind of clean up after that. And there's a few hardy souls who stay overnight, but basically it's mostly during the day in the setup. And the thing we will also have about 5 o'clock, we will have a cookout dinner type thing at the field day site. And you don't have to participate in field day, but you can show up anyway. Just let us know you're coming, so we plan ahead, for the right number of people. But it's a great thing to learn about how you adapt to all kinds of crazy stuff. And usually we have a obligatory rainstorm in the middle of it, just
Weather event.
Yeah, right, a weather event. But last year was just horizontal rain coming right through. But anyway, it's a challenge, but it's fun and you learn a lot. Dairyland Dare is coming up in August, and that's Luke is going to be, and we're talking about on August 19th. If we get enough people ready for it, we want to do a fox hunt, instead of our regular meeting that night. And so we'll start a little bit earlier. But what what a fox hunt is? Somebody's out there with a radio and you got to go find them. So, and we usually do it on 2 meters. And that's, we've done that on and off over the years. It depends on how many people are willing to be able to walk. We need more than one. It takes a little bit of.
But he didn't show because we weren't here.
So you gave these.
I didn't give him Don, took him because I have been in here, honey.
Gonna make something with them?
Yes, we got that $1,000 order.
Oh, but not that, just something different.
No, he's making something completely.
So we have to order them. Because I can't find them anywhere.
You get him? There we go. There we go. Thank you.
All right.
I've also, the Yellow Thunder is having their Circus City Swap Fest on August 23rd. Bike the Barns. Now Bob Abrams is doing that now,
Yeah,
right?
and a note for that is that Bob Abrams it's just his first year. We're having our first meeting with the folks tomorrow to arrange where and all.
Okay.
But just a note that we have a little conflict this year. I think I may have mentioned it before, but
Badger Challenge.
the Badger Challenge and Bike the Barns is on the same Sunday? Sunday.
September 21st.
So the Badger Challenge used to be the next weekend, and for some reason they moved it up. So there will be conflicting for resources on that day. Now, personally, I think Bike the Barns is much fun, but that's my opinion. So you'll be hearing from more down the road. Bob Abrams is leading that charge today, this year.
So if you want to get involved in, setting up your remote stations and, chasing down vehicles and things like that on 2 meters, and, there's plenty of opportunities, to practice your trade. And if you're new to it, come do ride-alongs, learn what's going on. You don't have to come with equipment and everything else, but you can certainly get involved. City Badger Challenge, as you said, Kyle's in charge of that, right?
Badger Challenge is Kyle.
Okay, and so that's September 21st. Okay, any other announcements of events or things like that? We're glad to see we got good volunteers for tomorrow, the Hamfest. That's our kind of local annual event.
Just as a note as well, the last Wednesday of every month in general, and the last Wednesday, of course, the 30th of this month, the Aries Races of Dane and Iowa County will be meeting in person and in Zoom. So I think if anybody who's already on my membership list got an email today on that. We meet at the Dane County Emergency Operations Center over in Fitchburg, the EOC, or like I said, Zoom. So if you didn't get an email and you're interested, speak to me.
Yep. You guys that want to find out from Jeff, you got an email list to find out about this stuff.
Yep. So thank you.
Okay, and we have the ARRL Summer Field Day Planning Team is going to meet by Zoom on May 6th, Tuesday night at 7:30. Same day of the week, but earlier in the month, and it's kind of last. We do need somebody on the website to set up a little sign-in sheet for participation, so we get an idea of who's coming and when they can be there. So, anything else on field day? New business? Any new business to bring up?
I have one thing.
Okay.
Just wanted to make an announcement for City of Madison residents. If you have electronics that need to be recycled, TVs, VCRs, stuff of that nature, the city is doing free electronic recycling. So if you've got an old CRT TV or something you want to get rid of, and previously you had to pay a $30 fee for it, it is now free till the end of the year, or they stop doing it.
Oh, is that a drop-off or?
You have to go to one of the city drop-off sites, yeah.
Okay. Good news. But you said they don't take dehumidifiers.
Well, you have to pay the fee for that.
Oh, the fee, okay. But is this a free recycling, or is it a fee one?
The city's always done recycling. Samsung is just paying for it right now. They're copying it for the year.
Okay,
So they're handling the fees.
okay, great. All right, sounds good. That's the new business. Program, Patrick, would you like to introduce our speaker?
Sure. Our speaker tonight is Bob Brehm. He is the head engineer at Palomar Engineers. He's going to give us a wonderful presentation on optimizing end-fed antennas. Thank you very much, Bob, for doing this. We really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot.
Okay, is the floor mine?
It sure is.
Yes, it is, Bob. Thank you. And thank you very much on behalf of the club for jumping in tonight and helping us learn about end-fed halfways.
Oh, that's right. And thanks for KD9ZKI for sending me the Zoom coordinates about 10 minutes ago. So I did.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. I didn't get them till I got off of work.
Yeah, that's okay. As long as I got them, and that's what counts. So anyway, let me share a screen here. And let's see where we are. Okay. Everybody see the screen? I hope.
Yes.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about multi-band end-fed antennas, a little bit about coax noise filters that can be used with them, and so much more. And I'm glad to be here. My name's Bob Brehm, AK6R, and I'll tell you a little bit about me in a second. I'm the chief engineer and also a co-owner of Palomar Engineers. And so we're going to talk about that just right now. I'll give you a short history if you aren't familiar with Palomar. It was founded in 1965 by Jack Althouse, K6NY, and he was a great CW operator and always liked Drake equipment, and had all a full Drake line when he passed away. And in about 2013, he passed away at the age of 92, and his two kids who were CPAs knew nothing about radio, and they had put the entire company into a 10-foot by 10-foot storage area. And I went over there and took a look at it, and we decided to buy it because of the name. And the name had been out for so long, we thought it was a good investment just for that, if nothing else. But when we got in there, there were all the engineering files from 1965 to 2013 were there, and they were all written in pencil. And so as he changed products, he just erased the old schematics and put new ones in. And it was hilarious to take a look at it. And he had quite a few products over the years, and they were copied a lot by MFJ and made in China. And he got out of that business and basically stayed in the RFI business until he passed. So we took the company, and our objective was to provide products that make ham radio more fun, more enjoyable, and attracts more people into it. As I've enjoyed ham radio for since 1963, and it's been one of my passions, and really been enjoyable. So we turned it into a radio frequency interference company, and that essentially turned into a Ballon company, which ultimately turned into an antenna company. And we have lots of different products. We make antenna systems, off-center feds, end feds, loop antennas, and terminated dipoles for the military and things like that. And going along with those, we make Ballons, ununs, feed line chokes, and we introduced a product called a coax noise filter in about 2015, which has been a wonderful product and helped out a lot of hams reduce noise on their radios. And we'll talk about that in a little while. We have RFI solution kits for hams, for households, marine, RV solutions, solar type systems, those types of things. And my whole philosophy was, let's provide a solution that you can just unbox in a kit and put it on, and the problem is solved. You don't have to know all the technical details of the ferrites and all the mixes and stuff, but we provide that anyway. And hopefully you can read some of the technical background on the on the website about that. We have all different types of ferrite core products, rings, snap-ons, slip-ons, various types of frequency ranges. I'll give you a little bit of an update on that tonight. And for those of you who remembered World Radio Magazine and to some extent, I think it was CQ Magazine, there was an article always written for about 20 years, and the guy's name was Kurt Sturba. And Kurt Sturba was Jack Althouse. And nobody ever knew that until he died. But he was Kurt Sturba, and there's all kinds of free articles and free downloads and books and things like that that you can download on our website. And by the way, just about all the old products, if you have one, an old noise bridge or something like that, I've uploaded all the manuals for those from all the documents that we got from the storage area, and they're free to download if you want to take a look at those. We serve the amateur market, the consumer market, a lot of households who have noise issues or slow computer modems and those types of things. Also commercial and the military markets. But tonight we're going to be talking about end-fed antennas and all the different things that go along with it. So the talk takes about not quite an hour, and then there'll be a little question and answer at the end, and I'll award some virtual prizes if you get the right answer, and then open it up for general Q&A and for whatever questions you have on antennas or RFI or whatever pleases you. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about tonight in the workshop. We're going to give you a short overview of different types of feed options for antennas in general, and then we'll talk specifically about end feds, of course. But this is going to include dipoles, off-center feds, ZEPs, and just a general overview of popular end-fed antennas. And there's basically three types. There's resonant end-fed half waves, which are popular today. There's non-resonant end-fed long wires, and there's also resonant end-fed off-center feds. And you may not have heard of the last one. We introduced that product about 18 months ago, and it's taken the world by storm. Everybody is jumping on that bandwagon because you get more bands and less antenna length, and you only need two supports for it too. So we'll talk a little bit about that and compare and contrast it with the other ones. And you can make up your own mind, of course. We'll talk about typical configurations, how you can set them up horizontally, vertically, et cetera, and then how to choose one that fits your needs. Which bands are you going to operate? Are you going to be use it at home? Or are you going to be a POTA SOTA type of person? Are you going to use it for a field day? That type of thing. By the way, I don't think I've missed a field day in the last 60 years. I just love that. In fact, we host it here at Palomar Engineers. We have a multi-station and 16 antennas to choose from. So we usually have a pretty good time. And we work all modes, see a lot of CW and RIDI and FT8 and also on sideband. So, and we use all of our products, our feed line chokes, our noise filters, et cetera. Anyway, let's put your thinking caps on and let's go dig into the different types of antenna feed options. As most of you know what a dipole is. And I appreciate all your comments on field day, by the way. I found that pretty interesting. Glad you're good participants in that. But a center-fed dipole, depending upon the height of the dipole, usually has an impedance of roughly 25 to 120 ohms. 25 being a real low dipole, 120 being a quarter wave, half wave high. And when you feed it in the center, it's roughly in that range. And if you feed it off the center a little bit, the impedance goes up, and until you get all the way to the end, and it's roughly over 2,000 to 3,000 ohms, depending upon the height above ground. So there are a lot of different ways to match these antennas, and there's a lot of interesting things that you can get by using different types of matches. But they generally need something different than a 50 ohm coax to match them either off center fed or end fed. And so let's talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to give you some examples here. I'm going to use the 40 meter band or a 40 meter length of wire basically as the example throughout the whole talk here, although the same principle applies to 20 meter or 80 meter options. And we provide all those, but 40 meter one is a good one because it's used by so many people for POTA and SOTA and field day and other types of things like that. So in this case, this is an example of a resonant dipole, and it's a low resonant dipole, so it's not quite equal on each side. But in general, if you have a 40 meter dipole, they're about 65, 66 feet in total length, depending upon where you want the resonance point on the band. But in this case, and this is real common of what a buddy pole does with their shorter ones, they feed it off center just a little bit. And by doing that, it can match exactly 50 ohms fairly easily. However, you still always need a feed line choke. And that's true of any a dipole or any coax fed antenna. And we'll talk about why in a little while, but you always need to put a choke on it, either a one-to-one balun or a feed line choke or a line isolator. It's all the same words for the different words for the same principle. In this case, there's 5 snap-on beads on the antenna, and we feed it off center just a little bit so it matches exactly 50 ohms. All right, and typically these are single band dipoles. Now, in the case of a 40 meter dipole, it will be resonant usually at the third harmonic or 15 meters. So a 40 meter dipole generally can work 40 and 15 meters, and that's about it though. So with 65 feet of wire, you basically get 2 bands, and that's it. The total length of a dipole, by the way, is I'll get my little pointer out here if I can find it. Here it is. The total length of a dipole is 468 divided by the frequency in megahertz, and so that's the example that we're going to give you today. Now, with that same 65 feet of wire, I can feed it off center a little bit, and I pick up a whole variety of features. So let's give you an example of one. And this is one that we manufacture, but the principle is exactly the same. We have, in this case, 55 feet on the long side, and we have 11 feet on the short side. Again, the same 66 feet total, but we're going to feed it off the center a little bit. And if we're smart where we feed it, all right, we can actually pick up a whole bunch of bands, right? And I'll show you an SWR graph in a second of how this works. And but in this case, I have 66 feet of wire, and I'm able to work 40, 30, 20, 17, 12, 15, 12, 10, and 6 meters. One of the advantages of using the baluns that we make, and we make them entirely different than everybody else, by the way. We don't use toroid rings. We use ferrite beads, and it's much wider bandwidth and much less loss. But in this case, we can work all bands from 40 through 6 meters with the same piece of wire that you could just work 2 bands if you had it as a regular old dipole, all right? And so here's an example of the SWR that you can expect with this antenna, and it's roughly, it was measured at a 30-foot height through about 100 feet of coax. So this is typical antenna that you can put up. You don't have to have it really high, and you don't have to have it close to the house, but it's okay if you do. So here's an example. This is the SWR 3-to-1 line, and we chose that because most transceivers are able to, with their internal antenna tuners, adjust your antenna to work fine if the SWR is less than 3-to-1. However, most of our antennas are less than 2-to-1, so it becomes even easier. But with this antenna, is the one I just showed you, with 55 feet on one side and 11 on the other, This is the SWR graph of that. So in 40 meters, you're way down here, almost 1-to-1. You can work 30 meters, you're about 2.5, but your internal antenna tuner, of course, will tune that. 20, you're below 2, 17 is a little bit high, about 2.5, and 15 and all the other bands, including 6 meters, are all under 2-to-1. So it's very popular. It's a good antenna to use. We have thousands of these out in the field, and we have 19 dealers now, HRO being one, Gigaparts, Radio World, and about 4 or 5 overseas. And they really like the off-center feds. Our 40-meter off-center fed is what our 100 and 500 watt models are some of the best-selling antennas for all those dealers and for us direct too. We have a real good website with all the same products, of course. Now, as far as NPED antennas are concerned, if we were now to take that feed point and move it all the way out to the end, we have a couple of options of antennas and how we feed them and what their lengths are. So one of the most common ones is the NFED ZEP, and that's also known as a J-pole for those in VHF, UHF. They have the NFED half wave, which essentially is the same antenna, just different words. We have the non-resonant NFED long wire, all right? Not resonant on any bands, but if you feed it in the right place, you get a whole bunch of bands. And then we have the resonant NFED off-center fed. And I'll show you what that is and introduce you to that if you don't know anything about it. But it turned out to be a real popular antenna. Okay, this is the NFED half wave, also known as the ZEP antenna. They used to trail it outside or behind the Zeppelin balloons way back when. And essentially it's a half wavelength at the fundamental frequency. And if you remember your theory on a half wavelength has a very high impedance here at the feed point. All right, and so we feed it with a quarter wavelength. And a quarter wavelength, if you remember your physics, has a very high impedance at one end, and if you short it at the other end, it's 0. And then you can tap it up at a certain place, and it will be right at 50 ohms, right? And that's the principle of a J-pole. A vertical J-pole just has the half wavelength vertical, and then it's got a piece of copper down here, and there's a shorting bar across it. Well, it's essentially the same thing, but the principle can be used on any band, 20 meters, 40 meters, whatever, and it will still work exactly the same. Of course, you still have to use a choke on the coax here so that the coax doesn't radiate and become part of the antenna. But you can find a point where you have an NFED antenna here. You're feeding it at the end, all right, and you can match it at 50 ohms. Kind of complex. You got to have ladder line, do all that kind of stuff. And they don't really work well in the rain because ladder line generally doesn't work good in the rain. The other thing that most people don't tell you about NFED half waves is they have very high voltage here at the feed point. You have to be very careful about this, making sure it's not fed at a low point where kids and animals and stuff can get a hold of it. And I'll give you an example. If you're running 1,000 watts here, you're going to have roughly 2,000 volts here of voltage across this point. So you got to really be careful. Even if you're running 100 watts, you're still going to have about 250 volts there, and so that's enough to cause some issues. But typically, these are single band. On the 40 meter one, of course, would probably do 2 bands. They're high and they're long. And they usually they always need a feed line choke down here. But typically 66 feet, 1 band. Now, the next type of NFED is an NFED half wave, all right? And for I think about 3 months, we sold NFED half waves. And so it would typically be wire, there'd be a line choke, and there'd also be a 49-to-1 impedance transformer. Real common. You see lots of them, lots of designs out there today for these. And then we realized that at the feed point, of the antenna right here, you do have high voltage. And a lot of people were putting these antennas in, and they were grounding them right away at the ground. And then the antenna feed point would be a foot or two above the ground, and their animals were getting zapped, so you have to be real careful with those. So we decided that there's too much liability in that, and it's dangerous as a matter of fact. So let's create something that's a little bit different, and we'll show you about what that is in a second. But we'll continue the example here with the 66 footer and show you what we came up with. Again, a very similar, if you take the 49-to-1 transformer and you mount it high, and then you feed it up here so it's out of the way, danger-wise. And then you have a half a wavelength, typically 66 feet, for example. And if you run out of space, by the way, you can drop it here or vertically, or you could do a 90-degree bend horizontally if you wanted to. You can slope it up, you can slope it down, you can create a U with it. There's all different types of configurations, and they're fairly friendly. They don't really cause any issues on it. And in fact, in most cases, if you do put a choke in it, you put the choke down at a certain point where all the bands become fairly happy, and it will be different depending upon what lengths that you choose. But let's take a look at the SWR in this, and I'll show you the first limitation that you run into. Typically, if you have a 40-meter one, it only works 4 bands, 40, 20, 15, and 10, all right, without the help of a tuner. Right, but if you look at the SWRs, the 40-meter band dips nicely. The 20-meter band, it's in band, and it's under 3-to-1, of course. And the 15 is fine. 17's high, 12 is high, and 10. So 40, 20, 15, and 10. Those are all harmonics of each other, and you can work those fairly easily. All right. But they generally have to be harmonically related, right? In other words, you're not going to get 17 without a big SWR on it. Some tuners, of course, will do that. Most of the ones in the radios won't. So you have to have external tuners to do it. But remember, the only thing that an antenna tuner is doing is making your radio happy, all right? The balun itself is sweating. It's working really hard because it's so mismatched that you really have to derate it. So if you buy a typical 49-to-1, all right, like this one here, this is rated 300 watts. It's rated 300 watts in band, but if you use it on a work band where your SWR is 4-to-1, 5-to-1, you got to knock it down to 50 watts. Otherwise, you end up saturating and ruining your matching unit. And so you really got to be cognizant of that, and don't expect to be able to run the same amount of power of it. Even though your antenna tuner says your SWR is 1-to-1, it's only 1-to-1 because it's matching the coax load. It has nothing to do with matching the antenna itself or changing that. So just beware of that. I mentioned a little bit about voltages that are on the end-fed half waves. Here's an example. Most end-fed half waves use a 49-to-1 transformer. Some of them use the 64-to-1 transformer. And depending upon the number of watts that you're putting out, if you're putting out 100 watts, you've got almost 500 volts across that feed point. All right. So when you're transmitting, when you're talking, when you're sending CW or FT8 or whatever it is, there's 500 volts right there at that antenna feed point. So you really got to be careful. If you're up here running 1,000 watts, okay, there's 1565 or 1789 volts there. So that's lethal voltage. You really got to be careful. And none of the other manufacturers tell you these little facts because they don't want to tell you the bad parts of the antenna. We replaced this one with a much safer and far superior antenna, which has lots of different types of characteristics. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about a different type of antenna. The one we were talking about here, let me just go back. This is a resonant antenna. It's 66 feet long, and it works on the resonant frequencies. Okay. Now, if I change the rules a little bit and I work with a non-resonant antenna, and by the way, resonant antennas and non-resonant antennas both radiate equally as well. You'll see a lot of people say, "Oh no, you got to have a resonant antenna to be as good as a non-resident." That's not true. That's absolutely not true. They both resonate just as well, and in fact, the non-residents have some characteristics that are real useful. We make about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of non-resident ones. Our most popular being the Bullet. It's a 71 footer, right? And there's some reasons for that, but we start at 41 feet, 71 feet, 111, and 155. And you may ask, well, why are there different lengths? Well, different lengths buy you more bands. You can work 160 with a 155 footer, and with a 71 footer, you can still work 80 meters, but with a 41 footer, you can't. However, they're real useful for soda operations where you need a short antenna. So we make them in 100 watt. This is a 100 watt matching unit. This year is a 500 watt matching unit. We have 1500 watts and 5 kW ones too. So they're just different sizes depending upon what you need. The setup is very similar to what we showed you before. There is a wire portion here, and the one I'm talking about here is we're going to use 71 feet, just a little bit longer than the 66 feet we've been talking about, but it has some distinct advantages to it. It's 71 feet here, and like I say, the configuration can be zigzag. We have people running these in their attic. I have them running them down hallways in high-rise buildings, out the windows, behind their gutters for homeowners association, along fence lines. It just goes on and on and on. We've got over 10,000 of these antennas out. And so I've just heard almost every configuration I think possible. But anyway, the antenna has some unique properties to it, right? The wire is over here is 71 feet. And what we do is we cheat a little bit and we use the outside part of the coax as part of the antenna. All right. Now, most of you know that a coax rather has 3 conductors. There's the inside conductor. All right. There's the inside of the braid, and there's the outside of the braid. Now, you remember, if you took the extra exam, there's always a question on skin effect, RF skin effect. And that outside braid, even though it's one piece of metal, it actually has an inner conductor and an outer conductor, because the RF only travels on the outside 0.0025 of the copper, right? And so if you're wise enough, what you can do is when that electron comes up the center and on the inside of the braid, when it gets to the inside of the braid, it says, wait a minute, guys, where am I going to go? If there's no stop sign there, guess where it goes? It goes on the outside conductor all the way down to where a choke is that stops it. So if we choose the length of the 71 feet here, and I choose 42 feet of the coax, and by the way, you're going to have the coax anyway, so why don't you use it? And if you're smart, you'll use it in a vertical, so you get a little vertical takeoff angle, get a little bit more DX out of it, although you don't have to, you can. You now have an antenna that's 71 feet long plus 42 feet long. Your antenna total length is 113 feet, all right? Because it's 113 feet, you can work 80 and 60 with a tuner with only a 71-foot antenna. And a lot of people do that, all right? When I went to a Quartzsite a couple of years ago, there must have been 30 of my bullet antennas out there for working different stations all the time, all right? we use the braid of the coax to radiate. We want it to radiate all the way down to the choke. After the choke, all the way back to the radio, you can have, it can be as long or as short as you want, right? If it's really long, all right, our suggestion is put a coax noise filter in there, and you'll get rid of a lot of the noise that's picked up by the outside part of the braid. And particularly if you're in a normal household where you're running the coax through an attic, or you're running it next to digital products like, routers and those types of things, it picks up a lot of their noise, but it's only picking it up on the outside braid. And if you want to get rid of that noise, use a coax noise filter. Good for about, 5 to 6 S units of noise reduction, which is usually quite a bit. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so what are some of the SWR characteristics of a particular antenna? This is the 71 footer, all right. This one was wired strictly as a sloper, all right. It was 71 feet, and I believe it was like 30 feet at one end and about 12 feet on the other end, all right. And this is the characteristic SWR that we got on it. This is the 3-to-1 range here, the ruler, and this is 2-to-1, this one right here. You'll see that most all the bands are under 2-to-1, right? And it includes, by the way, 80 meters. You get 40. You can tune 30. You can tune all the bands, and I didn't show it here, but 6 meters is also included. You can basically tune all the bands from 80 through 6 meters, and the SWRs will all be under 3-to-1. All right, and your tuner should be able to tune every one of those. So now you have an antenna. It's only 71 feet of wire. You need about a 50-foot run of coax for it, because you're going to put the choke at the 42-foot mark. You can now work all these bands. You don't need 133 feet like you do with an end-fed half wave, because an end-fed half wave won't work the low band unless 80 meters, unless it's 133 feet long. All right, ours will. Okay, so if you have the room and you want to put a 155 footer in, guess what? Now you can work 160. You can also, again, work just about all the bands. But guess what? Virtually all the bands, this is the 2-to-1 mark, all the bands are under 2-to-1, all the way out. We have a lot of folks that use 155 footer on their ranches or wherever they're going to do it. And you can zigzag them around. You can put them, almost in a circle, and they'll still work just fine. Just remember that the choke now has to be at the 70-foot mark, not the 42-foot mark. So your antenna is 155 plus 70, which is a good length, and they radiate very well, and they're very happy for different uses. And you can go all the way down to a 41 footer. And in fact, we're developing one right now, which is 27 feet, and it should be able to work 40 through 6 also. And we'll be announcing that fairly quickly. Okay, so what's the last type of end-fed that we use? This is one that we introduced, like I say, about 12 months ago. It's called an end-fed off-center fed, right? And it's 55 feet of wire, but if you remember on the off-center fed, it was 55 feet on one side of wire, and there was 12 feet on the other side. And so it was 11 feet in that case. There was 11 feet short wire, and then there was a 55-foot long wire on the other side. That was a typical off-center fed. Well, if I cut off the little short wire, and instead I put a choke on the coax at the 12-foot mark, I essentially have the exact same antenna, but now I'm disguising the length by using part of the coax as part of the antenna. So what's that look like? Well, here it is, very similar as before, all right? I have 55 feet here, all right? Again, I'm just showing a little bit of vertical, so in case you don't have 55 feet, you can always drop it, 6 to 8 feet if you need be, or take it horizontal, all right? Now, what you do here is you put a choke at the 12-foot mark. So your total antenna is 12 feet plus 55, right? We're back to the 67 feet, just like we had before in the off-center fed, right? You're going to have the coax anyway, so why not use part of it, right? So what are some of the advantages of doing that? All right. You have a shorter antenna. You have a 55-foot antenna versus the 66, right? However, you get all the bands. You get the work bands. You get SWRs that are usable, unlike an end-fed half wave at 66 feet, where you can't work the work bands, or if you do, the unon matching inner is really sweating and you have to derate it severely. All right. In this case, you don't have to. So guess what? We're not voltage feeding it. There's no high voltage here. We're current feeding this one. And we're only using a 4-to-1 unon. We're using a 4-to-1, not a 49-to-1. Much easier, much wider bandwidth, and much smaller to use and much safer at the same time. They're ultra broadband, right? Some of our 4-to-1s, our 4-to-1, our 100-watt one is good from 1 megahertz up to 160 megahertz. That's how good those little unknowns are. They're very, very broadband. And in fact, it only uses 9 inches of wire for the entire thing. It's very, very, very nice. They're safe and there's low voltage. And of course, they only require 2 supports if you need it. The coax does act as the counterpoise or the other part of the antenna, right? And some bands may require an SW tuner, but most of them don't. So let's just take a look at a typical SWR graph of this antenna, right? This is, again, it's 55 feet of wire, and here's our 3-to-1 mark. You'll notice that just about all the bands, except 30 meters. 30 meters is about 2.2. But all the other bands are under 2-to-1, virtually every one, except 12. 12 is a little bit higher, but certainly tunable. So you're going to get all the bands. You get 8, 40, 30, 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 with natural SWR curves, unlike the end-fed half waves, which are longer, have high voltage, and they don't have any dips at all. Okay, and so this is an advantage. And you also can work 6 meters with these. So we came out with this idea, and it's been a real good one. But I wanted to compare and contrast the SWR curves of a couple of different antennas, depending upon how much space you have and which ones you want to use. The end-fed long wires, the 71-footer I was talking about, uses a 9-to-1 transformer because that's what's required for a non-resident. And the end-fed off-center fed uses a 4-to-1 transformer because that's what it requires. It's a resonant. So the impedances are a little bit different. And the results that you get on a graph are a little bit different for SWR. So this is an end-fed off-center fed. Remember, it's 55 feet, right? And this is the SWRs. And so on some bands, it's a little bit better than the 71-footer. And on some bands, it's not quite as good. On other bands, the 71-footer is better, all right? It's got better SWRs. And guess what? It also works 80 meters, whereas the 55-footer can't work 80 meters at all because it's a resonant antenna. And so depending upon your situation, you can choose either one of those or even a shorter than the 71 one. You could choose a 41 and it would still work too. So it just depends upon your situation and how your setup is and whether you have enough coax to use it as an end-fed off-center fed. All right. So when you compare and contrast all these antennas, we've talked a little bit about the end-fed half wave, the non-resonant end-fed long wire, the end-fed off-center fed, and then the regular off-center fed with the 2 wires. This has got one of the wires, the short wire disguised as the coax. This one here is just a non-resonant. It's got a long counterpoise. This one has no counterpoise whatsoever. However, it's longer. But on the other hand, it only gets 4 bands, and that's it. The non-resident one gets all the bands, every one of them. The end fed off center fed here gets every band from 40 through 6, and the off center fed, of course, does the same. However, it requires 3 supports. You got to support the matching unit and also both of the ends. So depending upon your situation in terms of how you're going to support it, how you're going to put it up, whether it's being used for portable operations, et cetera, you have all these different options for end feds that can meet your needs. Just be aware of the high voltage issue on the end fed half waves. Very few people will tell you that. And whereas the other ones are all current fed, this one is a voltage fed one, and it can get into some complex issues, believe me. So we just compared and contrasted those. We think the most convenient end fed is the resident end fed, the resident end fed off center fed, the last one we talked about. And that's followed by the non-resident long wire. We have a lot of long wires out there, almost 10,000 of them, and probably a little bit over 1,000 of these antennas that we introduced about a year ago. So one of the questions that most people have is, okay, how do I set these things up and how do I use them? So we're going to spend a few minutes here just talking about some of the logistics. How do you determine the length, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So if you look at the non-resident end feds, most popular ones are the 71 footers or the 155 footers. And they also come in 41s and 111s if people want some intermediary type frequencies with them. HRO sells both of these direct and as well as us. And these are the different bands that they cover. And this covers every band 80 through 6. This is all the bands except 60, from 160 to 10. All right. So it's just like I say, it depends upon how much space you have. It takes 2 supports to do that, and they work just fine. We have them in complete kits, and also we sell the individual parts if you want to make parts of it yourself, like you may have the wire, for example. The resident end fed off center feds basically come in 3 different sets: 25 feet, 55 feet, or 95 feet. The smaller ones are used a lot by the POTUS people and the portable operations, and they're used a lot in field day too, by the way, and as well as some of the soda people that use POTA and soda also use 40 meters, but most of them stick through 20 through 6 meters, and we have that available. And then we also have the long one, which is 95 feet with a 40-foot counterpoise or coax length. So we put a choke at the 40-foot mark, the 12-foot mark, or the 7-foot mark, depending upon the length of the wire that's associated with it. As I said before, you can make these horizontal, you can make them all vertical, you can make them partly vertical, horizontal, and another part vertical. You can slope them down, you can slope them up, you can slope them zigzag. I've had people run them around fence lines in almost 360 degrees. I've had folks run them through in the inside of behind their gutters. All right, and they paint them the color of the wood so that they can't be seen by homeowners associations. I've had people hide them in fiberglass, flagpoles, all different types of things. But they're very flexible and they're very friendly in terms of configurations. There's all sorts of different shapes like we talked about. Okay, all of our antennas do require a feed line choke. Okay, and typically we also recommend, depending upon the length of the coax between the existing choke that you have to have and the radio, we recommend a coax noise filter. And we'll talk, like I say, I have one slide on that in a couple minutes. You can top feed them or bottom feed them. You can feed them at the slope. Soil conductivity doesn't really make too much difference with these antennas because essentially they're all dipoles. They're all off-center fed dipoles. you want to keep them at least 3 feet away from metal objects. Or if you have a tower, put a yard arm on the tower and put it out a couple of feet if you're going to stretch the coax down near the tower, right? I do that all the time and it works just fine. In terms of matching the antenna to the coax, we use UNONS. UNON stands for unbalanced to unbalanced. Coax is an unbalanced feed line, and you're going to be feeding an unbalanced antenna, right? Whereas a dipole, for example, would use a balun, which would be a balanced antenna, both sides being essentially the same, equal to a unbalanced antenna. Off-center feds also use baluns if they're using 2 wires, right? And by the way, I forgot to mention this, but all of our off-center fed antennas, you can work the 2-wire ones. You can work 15 meters with them, and none of the competitors provide 15 meters. They use completely different offsets, and none of them that I know about feed them with hybrid balance. We have a 4-to-1 and a 1-to-1 choke, all built into the same box. All right, and using a different offset. So we don't have some of the matching issues that people have if they're using different lengths of coax, because the coax becomes part of the antenna and it radiates unless you put a stop sign up there to stop it, which is called a choke. Okay, the connections for the coax and the antenna feed point are important. And in fact, if you want to use multiple counterpoises, you can do that. You can use the coax as one counterpoise, but because of the way you put it together or put it up on your supports, one band may not be working as well as you want it to. You can put an additional wire off of the side stud on the matching unit, specifically to act as a counterpoint for that particular band. And you just have to experiment with the length of it, but you can get a certain length out of it, I'm sure, where your SWR will be under 1.5 to 1 on, let's say, 60 meters, and it will work just fine. You can have multiple counterpoises. You could theoretically have one for every band. What we do is we pick one length, like the 42 feet, so that most all the bands are happy with one particular length, although you can have different ones depending upon your specific needs. We produce these in all kinds of powers, 100 up to 5,000 watts. And these are real watts, by the way. If Balun says 1,500 watts, it'll take 1,500 watts sideband and usually about 1,000 watts digital. All right. I'm a former world champion RTTY contester from the early 2000s. I have quite a few world championships. And so when I got into making baluns, I made sure that the specs were such that if it says 1,500 watts sideband, you're going to be able to work 1,500 watts sideband, unlike an MFJ balun, which has got a 5% duty cycle. Mine have 90% duty cycles for sideband and roughly 75% for digital. And you can work FT8, you can work 1,000 watts FT8 all day long in our baluns that are rated for 1,500 watts. And for 5 kW, you can work much more than that. All right. And so some examples of the UNONs that you could use for end feds. These are 9-to-1s. This is about 4 inches tall. And we use stainless steel in all of our fittings, by the way, and they last forever. This is a typical 500 watt one. We put a little bit more ferrite in it, and you get a 1,500 watt one out of it. And we put a lot more ferrite in it, and you get a 5 kW one. We make those in boxes, and they're 4 inch by 4 inch by 2 inch boxes. And the 100 watt ones are a little bit smaller. They're about 3 inches by about 1.5 inches by about 1 inch. And they're used, like I say, a lot by the portable people and people who want to put them in a backpack and those types of things. Very, very useful. Every one of these, however, does require a feed line choke. All right. And there's basically 2 different types. There's the typical ring like this, right, which you're going to put on your coax. And by the way, most people who use these use RG8X. You can run 1,000 watts of RG8X. through RG8X without any real major loss issues. If you want to use the bigger cable, you can do it. You just have to put 2 chokes on it because LMR 400 or RG213 or RG8, you can only put the coax through the chokes 3 times, and before the connectors won't go through again, and because of the width of the hole. And so you need to put two ferrites in series if you have the bigger cable. I run 1,000 watts all day long on FT8 through RG8X on all the bands without any issues, by the way. Okay, if you're so there's basically 2 choices of ferrites that can be used as chokes. This one snaps open. This one here, you have to lace it from the beginning of the coax, and it takes some time if you're adjusting the length. You got to unwind the whole thing and then wind it back again. These you just snap open and you take off the 6 turns and move it a foot, then put 6 turns on again until you adjust it to exactly where you want it to be. Of course, if you want to make your own parts, we sell the entire antennas. You can buy the individual items and put those on and make any combination that you want. And all the manuals for these are on the website. They're downloadable, they're free, and you can get ideas and configurations for different ones. The ones that we have as products typically tend to be the most popular configurations that most people enjoy. So one of the things that's on the pictures here is a coax noise filter, and it's in the same box, same size as the 100 watt Unon here, and it's very, very useful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about noise issues and why it's so important to have those. Here we go back to our typical antenna, all right, with a 4-to-1 Unon on it and matched with a choke, all right. And now at the other end of the coax, we have a coax noise filter. We call it a common mode noise filter, CMNF, right? And this is our 500 watt one. We make them up to 5 kW, by the way. Typically, you would put that onto your antenna feed line before the tuner, before the radio gets to it. And why are those important? Okay, there's a simple test to see if your radio is affected by common mode noise. All right, this is a little bit different than the noise that's mixed up with the signal. And I'll show you how to tell the difference. And there's a real simple test that you can perform to decide whether you have it even in your home station now or a portable. So here's the simple test. All right. First of all, if you have a noise level on your radio, pick a place on the dial where you don't have anybody talking, you just have background noise. The first thing I want you to do is to just unplug the coax altogether. Unplug it and see if the noise level goes down to near 0. It should be S0, S1 or something like that. If it's not, if you still have noise coming in and you've unplugged your coax, or 100%, your noise is coming in from another source. It may be coming in from a USB cable, for example, from a noisy power supply on a computer. It may be coming in from some other way, but it's coming in. And you've got to solve that problem first before you solve the common mode noise problem that's coming in on the coax, possibly coming in on the coax. But let's assume that, and by the way, we have kits for virtually all the transceivers, ICOM 7300s, Yaesus, Kenwoods, Flex System, all that type of stuff. And you can just pick your model and buy the solution kit for it if you need to. All right, but now I'm going to tell you a real simple test for common mode noise. Now remember, coax has 3 conductors, and so the antenna generally has the signal and the noise, some noise coming down the center conductor, the center and the inside of the coax. However, the outside of the coax is a second antenna. And so you always have 2 antennas when you plug in your coax. It's all the noise and stuff that's picked up by the outside braid, all right, in addition to the signal that's coming down the center. And they add when you screw in the coax connector, right? So here's how to determine which noise you have or whether you have both of them, right? So the first thing you do is you unplug your coax, of course. And what you do is you roll back the outside portion of your connector and you just put in the center tip. Don't let the outside touch at all and measure your noise level, right? And do this on each band, all right? Because each band will have a little bit different frequency response to noise. So measure it, and let's just hypothetically say the noise level is S2, right? It just goes up because you got signal and noise coming. Now what I want you to do is take that outside portion of your coax connector and hook it in. Add that second antenna, right? Because they meet when you screw the connector in. You're adding the noise from the second antenna. If that noise jumps up from, let's say, S2 to S4, S5, and I've seen it step up as much as 3 or 4 S units, and some people who call me up and do it, live as we're talking, all right? That's called common mode noise. And a common mode noise filter will suppress that noise. So that difference in noise, right, between S2 and let's say S4, S5 will be gone. You'll only hear the S2, all right? Now, in some cases, you may not have any difference. If you have no difference, that means you have no common mode noise and you don't need a filter. But in a lot of cases, you do, right? Okay. So what can a filter do? All right, here's a sample graph, all right, of how many dB these filters can reduce. This simple little black box here, this little $70 box, okay. And I sell thousands of these here. These are just incredibly useful for a bunch of uses, and I'll tell you about that in a second. It typically will give you around 30, 35, maximum 38 dB. That's about 6 S units, a little bit over 6 S units of noise suppression of the noise difference between the center pin and the outside. All right, that's pretty darn good. The larger ones here that are from higher power, okay, they'll give you up to 49 dB. All right, that's what, a little bit over 8 S units of difference. And in fact, on the big ones, we also put in as an option ground bleeders. They'll bleed off static that's on the center conductors. I'll tell you a short little side story. I don't know how many of you ever worked Art Bell over in Arizona, but Art Bell was very well known, very big celebrity. And he and I and Bob Heil used to talk all the time on 80 meters when they were all alive. And Art Bell had 2 1,700-foot loops, and they were on, one was, and they were separated by 50 feet apart vertically. I think he had about 9 70-foot towers, and he had 2 1,500-foot loops, and he was running Yaesu FT9000s. And he said, I'd be sitting out there in the desert in the middle of nowhere, and the wind would come up, and the wind static alone would create 90 volts on the center pin of my coaxes and wipe out my front ends of my FTDX 9000s. And I would have to have them fixed every time. So he said, I came up with a solution called the static bleeder. And he told me how to make it. It's simple. You can make it yourself. You take about 150,000 ohm resistor, you put it on the center pin, and you bleed it off to the outside of a coax connector or the ground. And that will consistently bleed off the static. And so what we did is we took that same concept, and because you're putting these chokes, typically these noise filters, you're putting very close to where your radio is. You can bleed it off right there before it gets into the radio and harms the front ends of it. So we incorporate those static bleeders inside of our maxi chokers, and also our mini chokers too, as an option, right? So just be aware of that. Sometimes that happens, particularly if you're in a location where you get a lot of wind static where you have a high static that's in the air. This is one thing that you can use to protect that. We also sell them as a separate little coax connector, which you can plug into a simple T connector and use it that way too. It's another way to do it. One of the things I wanted to just make as a general comment is when you buy chokes, okay, from anybody else besides us, make sure you have the specs on it. All right. Here's an example of 1 to 61 megahertz. We show you exactly what the specs are, what you can expect from a suppression standpoint. All right. Depending upon what you're buying. To my knowledge, nobody else does this. Nobody else will tell you what their choke is good for. And a lot of chokes are only very good for just one small frequency, right? The W2AU chokes, the K2RP chokes, those types of chokes, they're virtually only good at one frequency. And here's another thing that I'm not sure you're aware of, but if you take a piece of coax and you coil it around, put it around a piece of PVC or something, all right, and then use that as a choke, what that actually is a parallel tuned circuit. The coax has an impedance of about 28 picofarads a foot, and whatever the inductance is from the diameter and the amount of coax you have, that performs a parallel tuned circuit. A parallel tuned circuit, by definition, has infinite impedance at resonance only. When you're away from resonance, which means plus or minus a couple of hundred kilohertz, all right, KCs for the old guys like me, it's useless. They're down to zero again. So they may have a very high impedance of minus 50, minus whatever, and they're good at one frequency. So if you have a one frequency antenna, 40 meter vertical, for example, or something like that, they're very good. They're not very good for tri-band beams, although all the manufacturers tell you to use them. They're only good for one frequency, plus or minus a couple of maybe 100, 200 kilohertz at the most. Other than that, they're just an extra piece of coax. Ours, on the other hand, are broadband. You can see they're broadband across the whole range. Much more useful. So whenever you do buy a choke, at least look at the specs. Get a graph or something that tells you how good a choke are they, right? I'm going to spend just a little bit here talking about antenna switches because most people aren't aware of these. When I was invited back to Dayton 2 years ago, and I was the keynote speaker for Flex Radio. They had 600 guys for dinner on Friday night, and they invited me back, paid all my expenses and everything else, and set me up for 3 days there. And they wanted to know about Flex Radio and specifically things about how to use chokes and RFI kits and that type of stuff. And I talked about RFI and Flex Radio. And I run Flex radios too, so very familiar with them. And one of the things that, one of the comments that I got quite a bit was the whole concept of coax noise filters. Most people weren't aware of those. So let's just look at a typical radio system. You have a transceiver, possibly a noise filter here, a linear amplifier, an antenna tuner, and then you have an antenna switch generally. And you may have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 switches. 5 antennas. And those are all going through a antenna switch. Now, we've been talking about in the past few slides here about using an end-fed antenna, but it could be, frankly, any type of antenna. You need to put a coax, a choke at the feed point. And the reason that you put it at the feed point is because all the energy that's coming up the center of the coax, you want it to stay on the antenna. You don't want it to come back. In our case here, we do want it to come back because we're using it part of the coax as part of the antenna. However, we do stop it with the choke that's on the coax. But if you have a tri-band beam or you have a dipole or you have some other type of antenna where you want all of the energy to stay on the antenna, then you need to put a choke or a balun, if it's a 1-to-1, for example. You need to put that on the feed point of the antenna. On the other hand, all the way from that feed point, all the way back to your radio, you have, remember, a second receive antenna. That's the outside of the coax. And so you do that simple little test to decide whether you've got common mode current or not, or whether the outside of that coax is actually generating no extra noise for your system. Now, we've been talking about doing that with just one antenna. But now I'm going to give you a concept. Here's the concept. You have, let's say, an antenna switch. Now, the antenna switch may have multiple antennas on it, coax connectors. And remember, the antenna switch only switches the center conductors. It only switches the centers. All of the braids are hooked together. It's not switching the braids, right? So think about this. I'm going to go to the next slide here because it's just an expanded portion of the same picture. These are the three antennas. These are three filters, and I'll tell you why we're going to use them. If you just take this coax filter, whether you have a choke here or not on the feed point, all the way back to here into your switch, all the braids are picking up noise. So here's theoretically what can happen. You've selected antenna number 1. You selected this antenna number 1 here. But because all the braids are hooked together, you may be picking up noise on the braid of antenna 3, and it's adding to the noise that you're picking up on the first one. All right, and I found out the hard way on this one. And what I found out is that I have 3 acres here, and I'm using an antenna. I'm using a log periodic in the back part of the property, but I have another antenna, a ZS6BKW, at the front of the property, which is real close to my neighbor who's got a solar system. So I'm sitting here and I'm selecting my log periodic as antenna number 1. All right, nice and quiet as a single thing, as a single antenna. However, I'm picking up tons of noise from the antenna that's next to my neighbor's solar system. So I said, I got to have a solution for this. I got to solve that problem. And I was feeding all these coaxes into a coax switch, and then I was putting the filter between the coax switch and the transceiver of the linear. So I had one filter for all 3 antennas, but that's a problem. All the braids are adding up together. So what you have to do is you have to isolate the braids before the switch. Got to put a choke out here before they get to the switch so that the noise coming in on this braid does not affect the noise coming into the radio if you selected, for example, a different antenna. And here's an example of what it looks like. If you have a simple coax switch and you have 2 antennas going into it, you would put a coax noise filter in each line before it gets to here. So you've isolated not only the centers, but you've also isolated the braids so that when that signal comes down here, it's really only selecting this antenna, period. It's not selecting the noise from both of them. And with my flex system, I have 16, and I have a switch with 16 antennas on it. This is half of it. I have 3,000 watt chokes on every one of the lines going into it, except my dummy load, which is one of these. So these are all 3,000 watts with simple little jumpers going to this. So as I select an antenna, this is the one I selected in this case, it goes through here, but I do not pick up any noise from any of these other antennas from their braids. All right, and I'll tell you, it made a difference of about 3 to 4 S units in general for all the different bands. It absolutely was a great solution. Anyway, something you may not be aware of, and we put together kits. So if you have 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, whatever it is, antennas, we give you discounts for buying more of these. But it's something that most people aren't aware of. And there's one other thing I don't have a slide here for, but I'm gonna tell you about it. It's the same concept. A lot of people have one linear amplifier, but they may have 4 or 5 different transceivers that feed that linear amplifier. All right. and they go through an antenna switch. Well, it's just the exact opposite problem. You now have the braids of every one of the radios hooked together. So what you have to do is you have to isolate each one of the radios with a simple coax noise filter. And I use these right here. I use a double male barrel connector, and I just put it on the back of the radio. And then I have this line here is going to my switch, and that switch is which radio is going to be driving a particular linear amplifier. And so it's just the opposite problem, but you still have to provide for that. Otherwise, all the braids are hooked together. So now you have multiple ground points. Even if you have a separate ground wire, you can get all kinds of noise issues. Anyway, just something to be aware of. And I've talked enough, so I'm going to ask about four questions here. And if you've been paying attention, pipe up and give us the answer. Otherwise, I'll just share it with you, and I'll open it up for a Q&A. Okay, so you'll get the drift of this in a second. So question number one is, what characteristics of a non-resonant end-fed antenna make it superior to a half-wave end-fed antenna? And I'll give you some answers here. The non-resonant will work on even and odd harmonic frequencies. A half-wave is a complicated matching unit with high voltage. Non-resonant has a simple matching unit and a lower feed point voltage. The non-resonant can work the work bands. The non-resonant antennas radiate as well as the resonant antennas. So it's either all of the above, none of the above, and I have no idea. I was asleep during the talk. Anybody got any ideas?
E.
That man, you get an award. You get a virtual award. Okay, now you know how this works. I got a couple more for you. All right. Question number two, where do you place the feed line choke on a bullet non-resonant 71-foot end-fed antenna? Right below the matching unit to choke off all the coax shield radiation. In the middle of the coax length to balance the radiation. On the coax at approximately 42 feet from the bullet matching unit. Between the antenna tuner and the transceiver, end-fed antennas don't need feed line chokes. Anybody got an idea? Charlie, go to the head of the class. All right, two more. We're getting there. What's one of the best kept secrets in ham radio? I'll tell you, all the contesters should know this. It makes a huge difference. Ladder line has more loss than coax. An antenna has to be resonant in the ham bands to radiate in the ham band. All end-fed antennas work on all frequencies, so just buy the cheapest. Coax noise filters reduce common mode noise level in your receiver so you can hear more stations. All extra class hams go to heaven.
Echo.
D is in dog. Okay. Very good. E is also true, but D is more true. Okay, one more, and you should all get the answer to this one. Which company is your best source? Okay. So there we are. That's it. And I'm going to unshare this now, and I'll open it up for questions. And I'll be here as long as you need me. Okay, I'm back.
Is there someplace we can get a copy of that presentation?
Oh yeah, I should mention that. If you go to our website at palomar-engineers.com, and you go into it says technical support at the top, and you hit technical support, and there's a drop down that says speaker presentations. And so this presentation in slide format, as well as PDF format, can be downloaded from there. And it's already up there, ready to go. I put it up a couple days ago, and you can download it and share it with your friends or put it on your Facebook page or whatever you want to do with it.
Bob, this is question.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're using the 71-foot antenna, right?
Yep.
And you're going to run the transformer close to the ground instead of using your coax for your center poise.
Yeah.
Can you just run a equivalent wire off the ground?
The answer is yes.
Choke it?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
It just has to see a 42-foot piece of wire somewhere. All right.
Okay.
So it can come off that little side stud. You can put a 42-foot piece right there, and you can put the choke, right underneath the 9-to-1, or you can put it out maybe 5 or 6 feet, so at least it works on maybe the high bands like 10 meters or something like that.
Okay. If you just coil it up underneath the antenna,
Yeah.
it's not going to do you any good.
Yeah, as long as you put a choke on it, it doesn't make any difference how long that coaxes.
Okay.
Yep. You can put multiple counterpoises off the side stud too for different bands if you want.
Okay. But they would be different in lengths to
Yeah, different lengths.
bands.
Yep, different lengths. Yep.
Okay.
So Bob, this is Doug, up W5WTX. You said that the various varieties of infed antennas were essentially ground independent. Does the SWR curves that you show, do they vary with height?
Oh, they'll vary a little bit, but if they're 5 feet off the ground, that's going to be different than 30 feet off the ground, but not a lot. All right. We've chosen the length. We've chosen most of our antennas are designed for about 30-foot height. All right. So, because that's what most people can put poles up. And that means that a part of the antenna somewhere is probably close to 25 or 30 feet. All right. If you people who run them on fence lines, for example, 6 feet. I've got a couple that do that, quite a few people that do that. So they just have to adjust the length of the counterpoise portion or where the choke goes on the coax to adjust for it. That's all. But radiation wise, they still work just fine.
So higher than even 30 feet is not a problem?
No, not at all. I know some people that run them in 70-foot trees straight up.
Thank you.
So Bob, Nicholas, KV9SKW, my question is about the outer shield counterpoise. Is there any the support for that? If it's metallic, is there any interference with having the outer shield radiating right next to a metallic support, i.e. a tower?
Well, I was mentioning that you don't want to run the coax down the tower, tie it to it, for example. You'd preferably like to have it a couple of feet away from a tower, right? Like put an arm at the top and a pulley and just have it a couple of feet out and just drop it from there. Is pretty safe to do it that way, or just sway the coax out 5 or 10 feet from the top. You can do it that way too.
I have a question. My name's Jeff. It's a two-parter. And I think you answered the first one early in the presentation. You were saying basically any antenna fed with coax needs a choke.
Yes.
Okay. So, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I was just talking to a guy today. He was saying, yeah, I run a mag mount for POTA with a ham stick on it. You don't need a choke for that. And it's like, okay, that's a coax fed antenna though, right? So my question is, it sounds like if you're running, I don't care if it's a vertical whip or a dipole, if it's fed with coax, you need a choke.
Yeah, because
so my question is, does the type of choke matter depending on the antenna, or is it strictly as long as it supports your frequency range? In other words, would I be using the same choke on a vertical quarter wave that I run anywhere from 10 to 20 meters? The same choke there as a dipole, as long as it supports the frequency?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Now I'll qualify that by saying that if you're using ferrites as chokes.
I'm talking about basically toroids.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, toroids or any type of ferrite, by definition, a ferrite is a frequency dependent resistor, right? And so different ferrites have different resistances at different frequencies. So I'll give you an example. If you just have like a regular snap-on, a half-inch snap-on, right? On 80 meters, if you put that on a piece of coax, that one little snap-on about an inch long has an impedance of roughly 100 ohms. That same ferrite on 10 meters has got an impedance of 200 ohms. And on 2 meters, it's roughly 400 ohms. And the rule of thumb is, in order to have a measurable difference, in other words, to have it actually do something that you can recognize, you have to have at least 1,000 ohms. So that means that if you took that one ferrite and you put it through just one time, all right, you'd have to have 10 of them on 80 meters, all right? You'd have to have at least 5 of them on 10 meters because they're more effective in higher frequencies. Now, the one way to get around that is you put the conductor through more than one time. So which means you saw that one choke that I had that had the large conductor, 1-inch hole, and the RG8X was through it 5 times. Well, you put it through 5 times, it's the same as having 5 squared or 25 in a row. It's the square of the number of turns. So in that case, 5 times, 5 times 50, all right, or, 25 times 50 is 1,750. So you got plenty of choking there for all the different frequencies, all right? So you have to look at the frequency that you're using. So you would use more ferrites at a low frequency than you would at a high frequency, or you have to use more turns through the center, which means a bigger hole in order to have the same effectiveness. But the rule of thumb is you need at least 1,000 ohms. Now, all of our chokes, our broadband chokes that work from 1 to 60, for example, they all have a minimum of 4,000 to 5,000 ohms. And because inside those tubes or those boxes, we have up to 5 different ferrites, but they're all different frequency ranges so that they'll do the low end as well as the high end, right? So when you hear something from people who are talking about using a mix 31, for example, that's a ferrite number. It's good from about 3 megahertz to 300 megahertz, right? And the numbers I gave you for the impedances at different frequencies were for 31s. However, if you would never use that particular mix on switching power supplies because they're all below 2 megahertz, and the 31s are useless below that. You would use a mix 75, and at that frequency, those ferrites have 500 to 1,000 ohms for one turn. They're really good at that. So on the other hand, if you use mix 43 or 61s, they're good at the higher frequencies. So if you put together a choke with multiple turns, with multiple mixed ferrites in there, you can get one that does, 3,000 to 4,000 ohms from 1 megahertz up to 60 megahertz. And they're broadband. You buy one choke, you don't have to buy a million different ferrites, do it yourself, that kind of stuff. So we took that route rather than selling different ones for different frequency ranges. But if you're doing it yourself, the answer is yeah, as long as you got enough turns in there. So if you had a ferrite ring, for example, as long as you put 8 to 10 turns through it with a connector, RG8X will go through it. You'll be fine at all bands from 80 meters up to at least 310 meters. All right, take a $10 ring. That's all it takes, and put and you'll be all set to go. Long answer for a short question. Sorry.
No, thank you very much.
Bob, would you need to put that on every antenna, or can you put it on the feed line down from the switch?
Well, that was the point that I was making in the last slides there. The answer is you can put it on the feed line, the common feed line for the switch, but then all the braids are hooked together.
Okay.
You see, and so it would be better to take one of those little rings and put one in every one of the pieces of coax and then plug in to the switch. And that way they're all isolated from each other, right? Otherwise they're not isolated because the braids are not switched. All right. MFJ made one antenna switch a long time ago that switched both the braids and the center conductors. And then they stopped it after a year because nobody bought it. They couldn't see the advantage of it because it was much more expensive. But that's the only one that I've seen besides the commercial ones. Otherwise, all the braids are hooked together. So you hook, 5 antennas together, you've got, if you have a switch with 5 antennas on it, at any one time, you have 6 noise sources. You have all 5 braids plus whatever noise is coming down the center of the one you selected. All right, that's a lot of noise if you've got antennas spread out all over the place, particularly if they're running through attics and those types of things before they get to your switch. They're picking up all that noise in the house and through the AC wiring and maybe the alarm system, all that. So the best bet is yes, put them on before the switch, not after.
So Bob, leading on to that, if you have a remote coax switch up the tower, did you want to put them up there and then another set?
Well, if
radio?
if they're only if you have a remote antenna switch and the coaxes are short, which means that the extra outside braids are going to be short, the likelihood of that picking up is a lot less than if they're running, 100 feet apiece when they're all going through a switch. So in that case, I would say probably put it in the common line from the remote antenna switch would probably be okay, right? If you've got a remote antenna switch and it's hooking up 100-foot pieces of coax, then yeah, you're going to have to isolate each one of them individually.
Thank you.
I've got a few questions here.
Go ahead, Pat.
Sure. You said you were talking about the noise filter, the coax noise filter. Is that effectively the same thing as a feed line choke? I have feed line chokes on the entrance point coaxes to all my antennas here in the shack. Is that effectively the same thing as that noise filter?
Yeah, the noise filters are just a little bit, they're optimized feed line chokes, what they are. And, they're typical feed line chokes, depending upon what type they are usually, 20 to 30 dB of suppression. Ours tend to start at around 38 and you go up to about 50 dB. So you get more, you get a couple more S units out of it. That's all, and they're real broadband. So you can use individual toroids with 9 or 10 turns on them, and that's good for about 25 dB.
Okay. You were talking about that common mode noise test. I have an antenna switcher. I assume that I do that test still at the back of the radio and not at the antenna switch.
Or... you want to do it. Well, either you take the antenna switch and you take all of them out, and you do one at a time.
Sure.
You may have one antenna that's noisy, and the rest of them may be fine. And so you would certainly put a noise filter in the noisy one.
Sure. Okay. And then I have a little 6-inch line of coax between my filter and the plug-in on the back of the radio. You showed that you just had a double barrel adapter that plugs it directly. And do you think that 6 inches of coax has any effect at all?
No, I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I just don't like running small jumpers because they sag. I wanted something sticking out the back. And so I didn't have it was a real estate issue, not an electronics issue.
Gotcha. And then one final question that actually doesn't really pertain much to this presentation specifically, just a curiosity. Have you ever toyed around with shortening some of these antenna designs even more through the use of loading coils?
The answer is no. And the reason is because I don't like the reduced bandwidth. And so the loading coil is, you can take a large dipole and make it in a 40-80 meter dipole in about 70 feet, but the bandwidth on 80 meters is not good. And so we have so many customers that use and the full width of the bands. They use FT8 and then they're using the low end of the band and the high end of the band. And you put the loading coil in there, you're going to end up using a tuner anyway. And so we generally stay away from that because it's extra labor and that costs me extra and I got to pass on that cost. I would rather design an antenna that has points that dip throughout it. That's shorter to begin with, right? Our end feds at 95 feet will do the same things and more than the end feds at 130 feet or 135 feet. So I've reduced it to the length that there's a lot of people that live in houses that have lots that are 100 feet long, and they can't fit 130 feet in it because they're only 30 feet wide. So now you can fit a 95 footer in there just fine, and also with the coax that's going to be on there anyway, just use that as part of your antenna. So that's opened up a whole variety of people who can now work lower frequencies with shorter antennas and still work all the ones above it. In fact, I have a lot of people that are in high rises in New York City that are using our little 25 footer with the choke at the 7 foot mark to work into Europe on 20 through 6 meters. And they're on the 29th floor and they're putting the antennas down there through their living rooms or down the hallways because they're not letting them put out the windows anymore. And they call me up and they say thank you. I can't believe I'm on the air again. So
yeah, I have much the same situation. Pretty small backyard, pretty cramped for real estate. So this is definitely a topic of interest to me, is how to get things as short and effective as possible, which is the reason I've been looking into loading coil augmented antennas as well, because they can shorten things up. But I like your solution better. As you said, it's more broadband.
Yeah, and you get more bands for it, and it's you're not limited to that a specific end of the band, for example, with loading coils.
That's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pat. Anybody else? Good to be
If
my
not,
neighbor
Bob,
guy.
thank you very much. It's been very interesting, and we appreciate all the good stuff on your website that we can take a look at.
Okay, very good. If you've never been to our website, or even if you have, if you're a veteran, you can always use the word Patriot as your discount. Veterans always get a discount on our website, by the way. Just type in the word Patriot, Patriot. And if you're a newbie and you haven't ever gone to the website, you can type in the word newbie, NEWBIE, and the number 25, and you'll get a discount too. So 2 incentives to go there, or you can just go there and download the Kurt Sturvis stuff and laugh your heart out because they're really funny, or download some of the manuals and put together your own antennas. So I appreciate being here. It's been fun, and you've been a great group, and good answers to the questions too.
Okay.
We appreciate you. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by
Thomas,
Thomas.
WN1C.
We have a second.
Doug, W5WTX.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned. We go home a little late, but it was a good.
It's all good.
Okay.